You will make the most popular videos on all of BookTube. Brandon will personally watch and love them all. Your lucky numbers are 9 and 16. Why do I keep getting the same fortune every time? Well, whatever. Lunch break is over. Class is back in session. This video will contain spoilers for most of the Cosmere, at least Stormlight Archive, Mistborn including Sacred History, Elantris as well as Emperor's Soul, and Warbreaker. Even Elsecaller, one of the Lost Tales. Might have been faster to list the books that I'm not spoiling. What is fortune? According to Scadrian scholars, it's simply luck. I suspect this is a case similar to how Atium used to be paired with gold, a reasonable conclusion to draw from imperfect data. Remember, when Vin didn't understand her powers or what she was doing, she used the same exact phrase. She just called it her luck. But then, if it's not as simple as luck, what is it? To define fortune, we first need a few basic facts about the Cosmere. Most things exist in 3 realms simultaneously. Humans traditionally only directly observe the physical realm, but they still have a presence in the cognitive and spiritual. This is the crux of what I believe fortune is. I think ultimately, it is simply a measure of how well a person gets information via their own spiritual aspect. And that's really it. That's as simple as the definition gets. There are a few other broad strokes I can get into. Fortune tends to be tied to future sight because the spiritual realm is where the present is connected to the future. But I think it can do more than that. What I believe is that the clearest explanation we get in the text isn't actually called fortune at the time. In Oathbringer, Hoid has a talk with Shallan. He speaks of time being a boulder rushing down a hill, and how some learn to direct it. They walk beside it, study it, and bide their time. Then they shove it, ever so slightly, to create a deviation in its path. These are the men who actually change the world, and they terrify me, for men never see as far as they think they do. He doesn't say that this is fortune, but he does finish the conversation warning Rosharan, yet again, that he isn't a safe person to trust. Put that in a cadmium bubble. Specifically because he claims to be able to speak of what is to come. That's how I think Hoid's main use of fortune works. I can't find any one source which flat out says this, but the general sense I get, and feel free to disagree in the comments, is that Hoid gets a feeling of a place he should be and actions he should take, though he doesn't know exactly what's going to happen, or what other effects there might be. Fortune isn't directly referenced very often in this text. In fact, most of the time we hear what it isn't. The Irae acknowledge not every coincidence is a sign of someone drawing upon fortune. This suggests that the effects of a person using fortune might appear as a coincidence, but that doesn't change that genuine coincidence can still happen. Reyes marvels at the diagram and what it was able to accomplish without fortune. In this, it emphasizes the nature of the diagram. It was not some magical foretelling of fate. There are real-life historical methods of divination, such as the I Ching, which don't claim to see the future. They just take a look at what currently is and extrapolate. That seems to be the basic idea behind what Taravangian did on Diagram Day. Apart from these references to fortune as a whole, here are a very few, examples of things in the Cosmere which we are outright told operate on fortune, either through the books or through word of Brandon. Shallan draws things she hasn't already seen and has no direct way to know, like the scene in Words of Radiance where she draws Yalb surviving the shipwreck and Shalash destroying a statue. She'll also draw alternate selves of a person, like the shadow scene with Melatium. In Wind and Truth, Kellic says she uses fortune to do this. Here, Kellic seems to reinforce the idea that fortune, at its essence, views into the spiritual realm. Not merely the future, but various possible spiritual connections. Interestingly, he also calls fortune unthought, which seems to tie in with the idea that Brandon equated fortune with a gut instinct. It almost seems as though it's easier to access fortune via the subconscious than to do it consciously. And obviously, the big one, chromium feruchemy. Expressly fortune, and something we've never seen on screen or know anything about. Hey, if this information was easy to find, it wouldn't be in a graduate level course. We know that Terrace scholars call it luck. We know that, like most attributes feruchemy can store, it's a trait that people simply have, even without any arcana. Here's what I believe led to this conclusion. Fortune is about vague spiritual senses, information arising in your subconscious, feeling like simple gut instinct. So consider the experiments. Let's say a spinner is playing cards. They have a hand with an okay chance of winning. Someone tapping a lot of fortune, feeling how connected they are to possible futures, might get an unreasonable burst of confidence and go for it when they end up drawing exactly the card they need to win the hand. That could look like luck. In reality, it wasn't changing the cards to make that person win, just gave them a sense of what to do to get a positive outcome. And then we have Hoid. This is mostly directly from Brandon, but he has confirmed that Hoid uses the mechanic of fortune. It gives him a sense of where he should go and what he should do. And that concludes all known examples of fortune as expressly called out, either in the text or from Brandon himself. From here, we dive into rampant speculation. Sorry, Jason. Let's start with atium, or more to the point, nalatium, the alloy of atium with electrum, which was called atium in the Final Empire. The obvious effect is, you can see a few seconds into the future. I don't know if this is ever expressly confirmed to be fortune, but it doesn't feel like a big stretch to say it is. In Secret History, when Kelsier is shown the connections to the future via the spiritual realm, he even says that it's like atium. People and objects are connected to their own futures, so by gazing at their spiritual aspects, you can see what they're almost certain to do in the next few seconds. And then, how about malatium? It shows the past, or alternate possible presence of other people. I think this is still fortune, and here's how I think it works. We've established that a person is connected to their own future selves. By that logic, you're still connected to your past self, as connection goes both ways. But the past self isn't just connected to you, they're still connected to the various other futures which could have been. Except from the perspective of one of the present, that's merely an alternate possibility. We don't know for a fact what pure atium does, but I have a suspicion. If atium lets you view others in the spiritual realm, there's a possible use case which would tie in with Ruin's own arcana, hemalurgy. What if burning pure atium lets you see someone else's spirit web fully, and this gives you an intuitive sense of how and where to spike people? Not just taking and granting powers and attributes, this might be the key to understanding how to make new hemalurgic constructs. Just rampant speculation, of course, and it would be immoral to even try. Still, one wonders. It's easy to swallow that god metals grant fortune, but just as chromium is a common metal and can affect it via feruchemy, I think even mundane allomancy can grant some access to fortune. The clear examples are gold and electrum. I expect they do what their god metal counterparts do, just not as powerfully, as they're only viewing your own connections. Still, fortune. Still getting information from your own spiritual aspect. We do also know that fortune will thwart fortune, and that electrum thwarts atium. On the subject of electrum, let's take a quick gander at first of the sun. We only know of a very few AVR talents, and the only relevant one isn't even an AVR species. SAC can show people threats to their lives in the form of visions of them dying in the immediate future. A more narrow scope than electrum, and thus far more useful, but it largely seems to be the same mechanic. I'm going to tie this in now to essence marks. I don't think forgery directly uses fortune, I merely think this is an example of an arcana which would benefit greatly from fortune. When you think about it, what an essence mark brings to life is a gold shadow, some alternate plausible present. Notably, there's no direct way to view these things. Even expert forgers must spend months trying out little changes, seeing what works, what doesn't, tying it all into a cohesive whole, piece by piece, built by guesswork and trial and error. Imagine if Shai had access to fortune. Imagine if a forger could simply burn gold, not just see her alternate self, but actually experience that life. It would cut the time required to make an essence mark down to a fraction. Another example, which I don't think is ever outright called fortune, but it also feels obvious. The Knights Enlightened. Renarin and Relaine can view potential future events. Renarin was able to predict the date of the Everstorm. He even predicted fates which were averted, like Dalinar agreeing to become Odium's champion. Apart from it being future sight itself, the reason I expect we can say that with confidence that it is fortune is that we see Renarin's mere presence is enough to blind to the future sight of a god, and we know that fortune thwarts fortune. Their abilities do have a few quirks, however. They don't just show events in the future. In Rhythm of War, Renarin sees a vision that's a metaphor. I'm not positive how exactly that works, though potentially it's related to the concept of platonic ideals in the spiritual realm. The way he's able to show both Adolin and Moash perfect versions of themselves, it seems that some spiritual truths are expressed through allegory. I'd like to see more data on that subject before I come to any conclusions, though it would be an excellent topic for group discussion if you want to post your thoughts in the comments section down below. It's worth noting that in Secret History, Kelsier says, "In this place of perfect light, truth had to be acknowledged." I wonder if that's related to why the vision was so hard for Moash to bear, because it stripped away his self-deceptions. When Renarin and Relaine go into the spiritual realm itself, their fortune abilities get even more esoteric. The visions they experience are following a script, and Gliss and Toomey are able to read that script, letting their bonded partners follow along. And finally, a young girl named Lorietta is able to see glimpses of possible futures in the story Elsecaller. Her most notable quirk is she seems to have an idea which visions are more likely than others, even throwing in conditionals. If we go to this place, this fate is sure, but we can choose not to go. They never call this fortune, but if we believe that all future sight is fortune, this seems to be an example. And that's the last of my examples, which I have strong evidence for. I'm still confident in the rest of my conjecture, but I expect we're getting into the examples people will disagree with more. Most of them, broadly speaking, deal with the same core, the idea that information gleaned from one's spiritual aspect shows up as instinctive ability or knowledge. The first one I'll bring up is the sixth heightening, and its instinctive awakening. The more breaths you have, the more intuitive awakening is. As we've seen from various examples in Warbreaker, a command is not as simple as learning the words. What it seems an awakener gains from having the sixth heightening is knowing how to form the mental portion of the basic commands, something which can be described but can't really be put into words. It must simply be understood. I think this benefit is an example of fortune. Another example comes from Elantris. Twice, Raiden is able to simply feel where the chasm line should go. The first time when he uses it to get out of late fees at the Elantrian Library, and then when he fixes the Aeon of Elantris himself. What I suspect is he has naturally strong fortune. It's like he could see the power from the far side and know what shape it could flow through. And lastly, Hoid. Brandon has confirmed that Hoid uses some sort of fortune. It lets him know where he needs to be and gives him an idea of what he needs to do. It doesn't seem to let him know what the specific end goal is, which is frightening. He tells Shallan, when she asks why he's in the city, "I'm not completely sure. I can know where I'm supposed to be, but not always what I'm supposed to do there." He's working blind, and he can't predict the side effects of what he brings about. Don't forget what we put in that cadmium bubble before. Hoid isn't some fairy godmother going around the Cosmere sending princesses to balls. To accomplish his goals, he's willing to do terrible things. He will hurt even the people he sometimes helps. And this brings me to the conclusion that I think might upset some of my students. Using fortune, Hoid brought about Elokar's death. At the least, Hoid believes he did. He says so himself. At the end of Oathbringer, Hoid tells Design, "I'm certain now that the reason I'm in this city is to find you." Hoid is saying, "I needed you in this position, trapped in the physical realm, disoriented by your severed nascent bond." He even mentions that she's practically mindless, unable to flee back to the cognitive, too confused to flee in the physical, surrounded by enemies, so desperate that you'll even bond me. To be clear, I'm not saying he went to Kholinar and thought, "I want to kill Elokar." From the way he's phrasing it, I'd say we can confirm he didn't. He didn't realize until after Elokar's death that getting Design was his purpose. But it turns out it was all along. He needed Elokar to start to swear the first ideal and then be killed just as Design was pulled into the physical in an area controlled by the Fused. And this doesn't absolve Moash of guilt. Hoid did nothing to remove Moash's agency. He may have caused them to meet, but Moash chose to do what he did. As for the specifics of how he makes it happen, well, we don't get to see many. I wonder if one day we'll get a Stormlight Archive secret history, which will detail Hoid's actions in Kholinar in this period. However, let me walk you through what we do know. In fact, let's work backwards, because that feels appropriate to Fortune. Hoid needs this scenario. A closely fought battle, chaos, where Elokar would have space and time to start to swear his first ideal, but Moash would still be able to find him and take his vengeance at that moment. And what allowed for that? The Wall Guard. Without them, without an army, the Kholin mission would either never have attempted a direct assault, or Elokar would have been killed too quickly. Brandon wrote in a specific scene, Crimson to Break, to showcase this scenario. As it occurred, couldn't have happened if they hadn't brought hundreds of loyal soldiers to engage the Palace Guard. As it was, dozens have died. That alone would have been a quarter of the total force Elokar and Adolin were able to gather without Azure. I don't know what path it would have taken, but I doubt it would have ended with Elokar swearing the ideal in the midst of two conflicting armies. And why was the Wall Guard available? Azure kept them together, loyal and fed. She had two soulcasters creating grain to pay her troops and to bribe the local Light Eyes into letting her keep doing it. And why did their soulcasting work? Because they had a room lined with aluminum. And who did that aluminum come from? Hoid. So there we have it. We don't know most of what he did during those months. We don't know how many other factors of that fight happened because Hoid took actions to make it be so. But we do know that Hoid believes his actions brought about this outcome, and we have at least one example of an action Hoid took, which, through a series of coincidences, led to exactly the outcome Hoid claims he needed. It isn't much, but I don't believe Brandon added these details for no reason. And I can't think of another way to interpret Hoid claiming responsibility for Design's situation. He warned Shallan and Dalinar what he was capable of, and he doesn't tell those kinds of lies. In closing, let me summarize what I believe fortune is. How well a person can listen to their own spiritual self, whether that means glimpses of possible futures, connections between others, or just instinctive skill with invested arts. Once you dig through and find all the little scraps, it's not that hard to arrange them into a cohesive picture. Even the most esoteric magic can be simply explained. Class dismissed.